Fantasy Focus Football, presented by Wingstop, alongside Stephania Bell and Field Yates. My name is Daniel Dopp, here to break down everything that was Monday Night Football. Guys, we had the Harbros going at each other last night. Yeah, the Harbowl. There's a lot of puns that we can make with this one. On today's show, we're obviously going to recap Monday Night Football. We've got Waiver Wire heading into Week 13, and we're going to do the early part of our Week 13 preview, knowing that we have the holiday in front of us. So all three Thanksgiving Day games, as well as the game on Friday. But first and foremost, my friends, it was a Jim Harbaugh victory in this one.
No.
It was a John Harbaugh victory. Hey, Harbaugh. There we go. I had a 50-50 shot as to which one I picked there. I just picked the wrong one.
Right.
Ravens. Dude, here's the thing. Was there anything that really stood out about the Ravens that was, like, crazy to you from a fantasy perspective? Because this felt like pretty straightforward across the board. No one really
Johnson did play us.
He had a target. I think that made our chat, right? I think I led the chat with. I saw Deontay Johnson had a target.
Yeah.
Did not end up with the ball. Was not happy.
No. Well, let's start with Lamar Jackson.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think we need to. Yeah, to your point, Daniel. What was notable from this team last night? Lamar does what he does.
It was a normal.
Derrick Henry does not score a touchdown for the first time all season, but he makes up for it with 140 rushing yards. So it's one of those where only 14 fantasy points might be your takeaway, but still, Derrick Henry, with how great he has been this season, you'll live with the 14-point effort from him. Zay Flowers, kind of a quiet night, but that's been typical for him this year. And then I know, and we've had a lot of fun with this with Mike, about Mark Andrews this season. And once again, last night played a reduced role with Isaiah Likely on the field. The only thing that I will say, and I think we're far enough into the season and far enough into Mark Andrews' career that this feels, I think, legitimate and credible, is that not all snap counts are created equally amongst tight ends. Mm-hmm. And when you have a player who's this talented, playing in an offense this good with a quarterback this great, the potential for a red zone touchdown just feels higher for Mark Andrews than even some guys who are playing 75, 85, 90% of the snaps at that same position.
Especially with his touchdown. I mean, I feel like he gets so much volume in that red zone area. Lamar just looks at him if you're going to be able to get in the end zone.
But I think that's changed. And I didn't go back and run the numbers, but I think in the early part of the season, he wasn't getting the red zone looks. I mean, there was nothing happening, and now it has been more consistent the last few weeks. So we've seen those touchdowns come.
Yeah, I needed about 4.5 fantasy points from Zay Flowers in order to beat our old friend Matthew Berry in our big dynasty league. I got that, so I was thrilled about it. But honestly, the rest of the way, when you look at everything that you just laid out, Field, it was like Lamar did Lamar things. Derrick Henry did Derrick Henry things. Like, you live by the Zay, you die by the Zay. I think that's the Zane. Is that
That's the Zane? Is that what you just said?
Yeah, that's what I said.
Well done right there. Yeah, not bad. I mean, he's such a talented player, but we've talked about this for a long time now with Zay Flowers, is that he might get you. What was the exact number you got last night? I guess it was half PPR.
I got 11. Yeah, 11.2 is what it was in full PPR.
Yeah, so 11.2 from Zay. Like, that's not what you signed up for going into the week, but it's also something you have to be sort of accustomed to given how this season has gone so far. So, no, the Ravens, pretty chalky. They play a massive game.
Rashad Bateman finds the end zone.
Yeah.
And I think that speaks to the fact that there's always the potential for one other pass catcher to do something. Like Zay Flowers is your main guy. Mark Andrews, you're hoping for something in tight end. But Rashad Bateman has delivered some touchdowns, I think.
Everyone other than Deontay Johnson can get involved.
Right, again, I'll continue to go back to like my statement last week, which is that I'm almost convinced now that maybe the best thing about the Deontay Johnson trade for the Ravens is that he didn't end up on somebody else's roster.
Yeah.
Because he is providing zero value for Baltimore right now. The cost was basically nothing, so it's not like I'm totally blaming them. But again, I just wonder how much longer he will sort of hold his breath and not be the squeaky wheel, because I can't imagine a guy who's got that much talent, who was playing that much and producing that much for Carolina, is really thrilled about playing 5 snaps a game for Baltimore, even for a team that is now 8-4 with a massive, massive game next week against the Philadelphia Eagles. I mean, massive.
It's going to be so much fun.
That's going to be a ton of fun. Yeah.
That'll be a really good one. On the other side of this, let's talk about the Chargers. Justin Herbert found his wheels again, my friends.
Again, I don't know that I ever knew he really had them. I mean, he's always had the scrambling ability. We know that he's been mobile enough to be it's added to his effectiveness as a quarterback, but we've never really seen him put his head down and decide to run, I don't think, as much as he is this year. And I chalk that up to his coach. Number one, he's healthier, so we've seen it more in the last few weeks. But I do think there is this confidence in him that if you don't see something, go for it. And we're getting the rushing yards as a benefit from the fantasy.
Yeah, 17.6 fantasy points out of Justin Herbert. Honestly, it could have been so much more if Quentin Johnson hadn't dropped like 6 passes over the course of the night. But
Yeah, it was a tough night for QJ last night. I will say this, though. I think there are some people that are maybe a touch disappointed because what has been happening with Baltimore this year defensively, they have been getting gashed by opposing quarterbacks. And so you've watched Joe Burrow just absolutely eviscerate them on multiple occasions this season. And you're saying to yourself, all right, Herbert, 20-plus points is certainly within the realm of possibilities when you factor in how well he is playing and how poorly the Ravens' defense has been playing. So a solid night. But for those maybe like me who were kind of hoping for like that 25-point miracle on Monday night, didn't quite get it, maybe in part because the offense lost one of its best players due to injury last night.
I know. Speaking of best players, J.K. Dobbins is among those running backs who found a new home and have really thrived in their new location. And obviously he had some familiarity working with Greg Roman from the Baltimore Ravens, but we didn't know what he would look like coming off an Achilles injury, and he's been nothing short of fantastic. In fact, I tweeted it last night, how explosive he looked because he just had a couple plays where once he got past the defenders, he just launched into the next gear and there was no bringing him down until a couple plays later when he got pinned between 2 defenders. If you went back and looked at the video, it was like his upper half of his leg was pointing one way and then his ankle got trapped by another defender, ends up with a left knee injury. He went in early. Our colleague Laura Rutledge reporting from the sideline that he went in early into the locker room to be evaluated at halftime. They originally had him as questionable to return. He did not come back. So I would presume more testing to follow, and we will see what his availability is.
And fingers crossed, because he has been one of the best stories, not just within fantasy football, but being able to see him come back from the litany of injuries that he has had, unfortunately, this year. Gus Edwards kind of picked up the slack from that standpoint, found the end zone. I don't think a lot of people were starting Gus Edwards.
Did he pick up the slack?
Well, I mean, he picked up the snaps.
He picked up the snaps.
Yeah.
I had Gus Edwards because I needed to.
In a 16-team
yes,
league, very
yes,
deep league.
yes, and a very deep, and it was, but you saw play out exactly what you thought, which is he might run the ball. The pass catching that J.K. Dobbins provides, nobody else is going to do that in the backfield.
Yeah, Gus is going to be a tricky one if he is, in fact, the lead back this week, which seems at least plausible because we know with Gus Edwards, it is going to require a ton of volume, a touchdown, and a very unlikely target. He actually did have a target last night. Actually, it was kind of a sick play. Did you guys see that? Where Herbert was under duress and threw the ball, and it was one of those where it might have been a backwards lateral, wasn't clear. Like, Gus Edwards snagged that thing, like, out of midair, like a very impressive catch. Now, it ended up for -7 yards, so probably wasn't a net positive for your fantasy outlook. That being said, it's going to require a touchdown for Gus Edwards to really pay off. A little bit more unpredictable. Hassan Haskins should play a decent amount of snaps as well if J.K. Dobbins is out.
Yeah, that's a really unfortunate one. I know a lot of us were really counting on J.K. Dobbins. We're going to hope for the best for him as we.
It's a bummer. Hopefully nothing serious.
Yeah.
He's been such a great comeback story, as Stephania just mentioned. Overcome a lot, and hopefully that this is either a minor injury or the kind of thing that he is able to play through this upcoming season.
I wouldn't be surprised. I would just say make plans that you are not likely to have him this week, but hopefully it's not anything. We'll see.
All right, well, speaking of making plans, we're going to dive into the Week 13 waiver wire when we come back, give you a couple of names with no teams on a bye that you could add in case you need a few people. We'll see you guys in just a moment. ESPN Bet Live returns on Saturday at 11 a.m. and has everything that you need to know before betting this week's NFL slate. Aaron, Joe, and Tyler return on Friday and will be on throughout the weekend with all the picks, props, and parlays that you need. Back here on Fantasy Focus Football, my name is Daniel Dopp alongside Stephania Bell and Field Yates. Let's dive into the Week 13 waiver wire, but I want to say this first. Week 13, no teams on a bye. You should have the entirety of your roster. There is no one you're having to have to pivot around unless we had injuries like we just talked about with J.K. Dobbins. So with that being said, Field Yates, I think the biggest name that we're going to talk about, actually, you know what, I'm going to start with Stephania.
Yeah.
It's probably going to be Jeremy McNichols, and it kind of is dependent upon the Commanders' running back situation with both Brian Robinson Jr. and Austin Eckler. What can you tell us about those two guys?
Well, Austin Eckler suffered a concussion, so we know the story there. He talk the concussion protocol, and there's no way to timetable predict this. Brian Robinson had an ankle injury early in that game, was cleared to return, ends up aggravating the ankle. I think he only played 12 offensive snaps in total. Dan Quinn said it will be a wait and see with Brian Robinson's status, and we've been through that already before with him dealing with several lower extremity issues already this season. So too early to say what his status will be, but obviously the Commanders have to look at what their options are, including Jeremy McNichols.
Yeah, things might change now that they're 7-5 and have lost 3 straight games, but don't forget that this team was extremely patient with Brian Robinson to the point that a few weeks ago, Dan Quinn on TV said to, I believe, the NFL Network, we're excited to have Brian Robinson play, and then like 90 minutes later, they ruled him inactive because the pregame warm-up did not go as expected. So they have been unafraid to take the bigger picture view for a player who's very important to their offense. I do think, though, that Jeremy McNichols qualifies for what is a rarity this year, which is a player being added that's actually worth the while. He could be a starting running back in Week 13, Daniel, despite the fact that there are 32 teams playing. There still is some value in that, especially in 12-team or larger leagues. If there's no Brian Robinson, if there's no Austin Eckler, I do suspect that you'll see Chris Rodriguez as well, but I do think the first crack would go to Jeremy McNichols.
Yeah, and he's performed capably when he's had
He's fine. He's a solid football player.
He has not been the lead guy himself. It's never been both of these running backs out at the same time. It's either been he's the number 2 behind either Brian Robinson with Eckler.
Steady. Yeah,
but he's just been a good guy there. Yep. So someone that we definitely need to look at. And by the way, available in basically every single ESPN
league.
Yep. Like 99% of ESPN leagues.
Sure.
Stephania, I want to ask you about the Raiders running backs as well, because we didn't have either Alexander Madison or Jahmyr White last week. Is there a chance now? And by the way, Ameer Abdullah performed really well, 17 fantasy points. What can you tell us about the 2 incumbent running backs before we talk about Ameer?
Well, unfortunately, we've got a situation where the game is early enough that it's before Sunday.
Yeah.
But late enough that they don't have a practice report yet. So, the Raiders, I would say, they're comfortable with where Ameer Abdullah is. Antonio Pierce has already indicated that. I would expect that Ameer Abdullah is going to get the start, but very iffy on Jahmyr White with the quad issue. He's had lower extremity issues throughout the season, and we will see with Alexander Madison.
Yeah, we'll see. It seems like maybe unlikely for once again for this week. And as you mentioned, Daniel, it's the Ameer Abdullah show. I mean, this guy performed well and played a ton. He had 88% of the snaps. That's a huge number for any running back. He had a team-high 8 carries, which is not big, but he had 5 catches for 37 yards and a touchdown. We kind of hope to see something from Dylan Laube. He had 0 rushes.
Nothing.
0. He had a 59-yard kickoff return. We saw Sincere McCormick rush the ball 5 times. But if Abdullah is once again the lead back, he should play a ton. Going to be hard to crack that top 20 or even the top 25 for running backs because they play the Chiefs. That being said, if they're playing from behind, Ameer Abdullah going to get some opportunities in the passing game.
Yeah, not only will they likely be playing from behind, they're also going to be, and we mentioned it yesterday, playing without Gardner Minshew. So it sounds like Desmond Ridder will be their quarterback.
Aiden O'Connell.
We'll see. Aiden O'Connell was at least cleared for practice on Monday.
Love to hear that.
So and it's really going to be an issue of coming off a broken thumb, and he's been doing some stuff in the background. It's not like this will be his first time gripping a football, but it will be his first time working in practice. And so can he do enough to, it really is a ball protection security issue and ball control issue when you're coming off a thumb injury.
I love quarterback ambiguity when you're talking about going up against the Chiefs. It's just so much fun.
Well,
my antenna suggests that it's going to be Aiden O'Connell. I talked about this yesterday, is that if the Raiders do something roster-wise, if they add a quarterback yesterday, meaning Monday, then that might indicate that they're going to not have Aiden O'Connell this week. But with just Desmond Ridder available, that makes me think that, okay, they're expecting Aiden O'Connell to also be available, and I do think he would start over Ridder, even though he has been banged up for the past 4 weeks.
Yeah, well, hopefully, regardless of who you have under center, he was so good in the passing game, like you mentioned, Fields, 14.7 fantasy points through the passing game alone last week. So let's hope that can continue. Let's talk about another running back here. Coming off a bye in week, here's the thing. Tank Bigsby.
Now we've reached the point. Now it's like, come on.
First 2 guys are guys that we were like actually saying you should probably look at them this week if you need them. Now we're
Gus Edwards also in a deeper league.
Sure.
We talked about him during Monday Night Football recap. Like Gus for sure. But everything else here, people, like these next 2 specifically, like we understand that we are catering to a very particular crowd with these suggestions.
Deeper league, bench stash, Tank Bigsby rostered in 33% of league since week 4, for what it's worth. Travis Etienne has only one game over 7 fantasy points.
What, over 7?
7 fantasy points.
That's
Since
awful.
week 4. We're talking 2 months.
Yeah.
I think Bigsby has 2 games over 20 fantasy points over that same stretch. Now, they are still splitting time in this backfield. He was out the last time that they played.
Right,
Stephania,
he
any updates?
dealing with an ankle injury. Hard to have any because they're coming out of a bye week, so you really don't get that much information early. But listen, week 14, we've told you a million times, you got 6 teams on a bye.
Yeah.
And when you're looking at who's available, I might be inclined, if I had the room, to at least go get Tank Bigsby and hang on to him for that week 14 situation, because you might not have great choices, especially if you're in a deep league.
Potential preemptive playoff bench stash if you need a running back.
And then on top of that, with the Jaguars coming out of their bye week, the team struggling, there was reporting that Doug Peterson could be fired during the bye week. That hasn't happened
Didn't
yet,
happen.
so it seems unlikely that it would happen any point going forward, the rest of the bye week. You could also say to yourself, maybe the team did some self-scouting and said, how can we get on track offensively for the final 6 weeks of the season, whether we have Trevor Lawrence or not? Maybe one of those ways is, hey, Tank Bigsby, you are now the new lead back.
Do we have any thoughts as to whether or not Trevor Lawrence is going to be back?
Practice yesterday.
Okay.
Sort of a bonus practice.
Yeah, they get the bonus when they have coming out of the bye, so you
bye.
can get a little bit of a hint.
All right. Love to see that. Last one here before we dive into our big defensive segment. I would be remiss if I didn't mention Noah Gray. 2 touchdowns in back-to-back games. Is there anything worth even considering here, Field Yates? What kind of a league would you, Field Yates, have to be in order to add Noah Gray off the waiver wire this year?
Again, my Massachusetts bias will prevent me from saying any negative things about Noah Gray, also a Massachusetts native, but you'd have to be in a very, very deep league. I think it's now 10:15 when we are having this conversation. Rankings should be up on ESPN.com in the next 2 hours or so. I do not have Noah Gray inside my top 25. I'd be surprised.
I have him as tight end 24. I can't believe you don't have him inside the top 25.
Okay, so I'd be surprised if he was much higher than tight end 25 if he even does crack that top 25. As we mentioned yesterday, through every game in his career prior to last week, he had 4 receiving touchdowns. Since last week, he also has 4 receiving touchdowns. He is hitting the absolute apex of efficiency right now. I'd be surprised if that continues going forward.
All right, listen, because everyone
First
knows
momentum is waiting.
I am the Massachusetts lover on this show. I say that Noah Gray finishes inside the top 25 at tight end this week.
Love it. I say Noah Gray does not finish inside the top 25 in tight ends this week.
Put it on the board.
Put it on the board.
We've had some
I was
crazy
gonna
board
say,
bets this year.
Travis Kelce probably getting a little nervous. No Gray getting all the love.
Right? I feel like if there's
think
one
Kelce
guy
ever
that
gets
gets
nervous?
Yeah.
I don't know.
But anything?
I just tried to start a little conversation.
Dive into that.
Because nobody's talking about the Kelces. I'm not sure. If
No,
you knew that, but
no one ever
Definitely not.
mentions those guys.
Never.
Those guys got nothing going
Yeah.
for them. All right, playoffs stash is brought to you
Playoffs?
by Wingstop. We're talking about guys that you want on your bench heading into your playoff push. This one is 11 guys, not just one guy, and it's
What?
the Buccaneers defense, my friends. When you look at them, they're rostered in 35% of leagues, which means they're available in about 65% of leagues field.
Yeah.
And this playoff matchup, the teams that they are coming up against, I think 5 of the next 6 weeks, you love the guys
them.
that they are playing.
Let's talk through it now. Week 13, Carolina. You like that one.
Love that.
14, the Raiders. You love that one. Week 15, a little harder. It's the Chargers.
That one's the one that you're not so sure
You're
of.
not totally sure, but I also, it's not like they're playing, the full-strength Philadelphia Eagles or Baltimore Ravens,
Yep.
right? Then 16, 17, 18. The Cowboys, the Panthers again, and the Saints. I mean, this team is
That's awesome.
poised to be an excellent streaming option for the rest of the season. On top of that, the Bucs quietly creeping their way right back into the NFC South race. This team certainly could end up winning this division. They're probably going to have to go 5-1 down the stretch, but with this schedule, it is absolutely possible.
Yeah, they haven't been super noteworthy as a defense so far this year. However, last week they played the Giants. They scored 11 fantasy points. I mean, if I get 11 fantasy points out of my defense, that's kind of what I'm looking for with this upcoming schedule.
I would agree.
It just feels really nice for them. So that is our playoff stash brought to you by Wingstop. And when we come back, we're going to dive into the start of our Week 13 preview, diving into the Thanksgiving Day games. We'll see you guys in just a moment. Remember to tune into Fantasy Football Now on Sunday and join me, Mike Clay, Field Yates, Stephania Bell, Damian Woody, Liz Loza, and Eric Moody, the entire crew. As we get ready for Week 13 of the fantasy season, from injuries to rankings, we have got you covered. Find us on ESPN2 this Sunday, starting at 10 a.m. Eastern, all the way up until kickoff. Back here on Fantasy Focus alongside Field Yates and Stephania Bell. My name is Daniel Dopp, and we're going to talk about these Thanksgiving Day games. I know it's only Tuesday.
Yeah.
Just in case you didn't watch the show yesterday. I love that.
That's a live turkey in our studio, people.
I was going to say, sounds like a stressed out turkey.
We're not doing shows on Thursday and Friday, so we're going to do that preview here today, and then tomorrow is going to be the rest of it. Let's start with the very first game, Bears and the Lions. I want to start with the Chicago side of it. Chicago played really well this last week, Field Yates. You saw a bunch of different guys be able to go off in this one. Let's start at the quarterback spot.
Yeah.
Caleb Williams. And coming off what was a nice game against the Minnesota Vikings, the Lions have been really tough for quarterbacks going up against them. Do you know where you have Caleb Williams ranked going into this one?
Yeah, he is outside my top 15 for quarterbacks this week, so not a player that I would be looking to start in really any size league except for super flex leagues. Let's keep in mind the matchup here. So again, just to reiterate it one last time, 32 teams playing this week. You are not dealing with any buys whatsoever. And as far as the matchup is concerned, Daniel, it is basically a non-starter. The Lions have the fourth fewest fantasy points allowed to opposing quarterbacks this season. Over the last 4 games, none of them have reached even 13 fantasy points. That's the number one, I should say.
You stealing notes off of my...
Yes, I am. And then this entire season, they've had just 2 quarterbacks get to 20. Yep. I know that you said recently that your sort of arbitrary successful number for a quarterback is, what, 17 or 18?
16.
Yeah. Even that's difficult to get to, and I think if you're looking for more upside, there are other options. Very encouraged by the play of Caleb Williams over the past couple of weeks. I would just say that this Lions defense has been so formidable all season that I do think you have a better option that you probably have been playing for much of this season.
I don't think I'd want to play the Lions defense at home on Thanksgiving, where in a year where not only do they believe they could win, but they believe they are destined for games in February. I mean, this is the most... To me, this is the most anticipated game on the slate for Thursday. It's not even close.
I agree with that. I'm excited. I mean, mind you, I'm totally unbiased in this one,
for you?
For what it's worth. But I can't believe Anthony Richardson, Mac Jones not a great quarterback, but Anthony Richardson, Mac Jones, C.J. Stroud, and Jordan Love, those guys aren't scrubs from that standpoint.
Not at all.
And you just mentioned none of them reached 13 fantasy points over the last month. Lions haven't allowed a touchdown in 10 straight quarters. That's 2.5
Really?
games. 2.5
Of any variety?
Of any variety, they have not allowed a touchdown, which has been unbelievable.
Or a freight train.
Boy.
What a day to be alive, man. I'll tell you what, I remember some old Thanksgiving Day conversations where everyone's like, can we have anyone other than the Lions play on Thanksgiving?
Well, you're going to see a lot of the Lions going forward, people, because they do have some very notable games down the stretch, including the Bills, including the 49ers, which I believe is the Week 17 Monday Night Football game.
I'm aware.
Yep. And we got a Week 18 game against the Vikings that could come down to being very big when it
division could be on the line.
Division.
Yeah.
So that'll be a very big one.
You guys have played already once this year, right? The Vikings and Lions?
Yes, we did. Okay. Yeah.
And stomped.
We did beat
How'd that go? Yeah.
Let's talk about the Bears wide receivers, though. Is there a chance that they could carry Mike Clay's momentum into Week 13? One area from a fantasy perspective that the Lions can be had is with the wide receivers, and it feels like with what we've seen from DJ Moore. Go check out yesterday's show if you did not hear it. But Field, we talked about it. DJ Moore getting better usage after the offensive coordinator change. Feels like he is at least a top 25 guy that you could be able to consider.
For sure. He's even higher than that for me this week. He is DJ Moore. Remember, over these past 2 weeks, what we have seen for DJ is 15 catches, and these basically have all been get the football in his hands early, let him do the work. Yep. We've also reminded people in recent shows about how this Lions defense, hard to score touchdowns against, as you just also noted, but that has been a trend all season in terms of opposing wide receivers. A lot of yards available, though. Michael Pittman last week had 96 receiving yards. Didn't find the end zone, but the opportunity for a 7-catch, 80-yard day is in play for both DJ Moore and Keenan Allen, who has 23 targets over the past 2 games, which, of course, has coincided with the coordinator change in Chicago. I'm more confident in DJ Moore than I am Keenan Allen, but both guys trending in the right direction in what is a critical stretch for the fantasy football season.
Yeah, I'm interested in Keenan Allen because this one is it's a little vexing to me, and I love the coordinator change, but he's had 2 games over 20 fantasy points, and then every single other game, he's been under 9.5 fantasy points.
Wow.
So I'm going to hope that they find a way to be able to utilize him more from a fantasy perspective. If I'm ranking him this week, and I would assume you have it the same way, it's DJ Moore, clear starter.
Yep.
Keenan Allen is probably a flex play if you need him this week.
Correct.
What your wide receiver room looks like. And Rome Odunze is kind of the odd guy looking out. However, I mean, Rome could still go off. We've seen what Rome has been able to do in good situations.
Yeah, I agree. Keenan Allen, to me, I think this will be more, if what we're seeing in the offense is a true shift, and I do believe that it is, I think Keenan Allen's relevancy will be more consistent.
Yep. Fingers crossed.
Don't forget he was hurt quite a bit at the beginning and even rolled his ankle going into last week's game and still produced that. So
targets last week.
Wow. The volume, and I do believe that volume will be there going forward.
Field put out a tweet yesterday, Stephania, that highlighted a few things.
Oh, unusual.
Going around. Yeah, Field's not a big tweeter, but that did happen yesterday.
Yeah.
Maybe it was Sunday, I should say, about these Detroit Lions running backs. They're the first duo in NFL history with at least 10 rushing touchdowns in back-to-back seasons. I cannot believe that has never happened so far in the NFL. Unreal. Is there any way?
What's the nickname again?
Sonic and Knuckles. Little video game love right there if you're into Sega Genesis. I mean, it feels like both of these guys are obvious must-starts at this point of the season. There's no way you're not starting both Jahmyr Gibbs and Dibbs.
Unless one of them is hurt. And David Montgomery did leave yesterday, second half, Sunday.
Whatever.
All one
Yeah,
day.
it's all, exactly.
It went to the locker room, but he did say to reporters after that he thought he'd be available by Thursday. It's hard to interpret practice reports right now because so many of these teams, it's just projections or estimated practice reports. So just keep in mind that even though you see him not practicing, nobody's practicing. They're resting them.
I didn't think it, and I don't want to put anything negative into the ether, but I didn't think it was that bad because after the game, he made it sound like he tried to go back in, and Dan Campbell said, "Hey, we got bigger fish to fry. We're going to hold you out until Thursday." So I'm going to hope that there are.
I think that was the gist of his commentary.
And we'll be monitoring this one as well. Amon-Ra St. Brown listed as a non-participant in Monday's, as Stephania said, estimated practice report. So nobody practiced, but if they had, they would have withheld Amon-Ra. As of right now, no real cause for concern.
No, and he did play his full set of snaps in the game. So there was nothing in the game that stood out. It's not like Montgomery.
Let's go ahead and pick this game just for a little bit of fun here. You're going to take the Lions?
Oh, you know something, Daniel? Let me think about this one for a minute. The 10-1 Detroit Lions against the reeling Chicago Bears.
He wants to hear us do this. He wants to hear us all take the Lions across the board.
I could not believe when I looked at it that the Lions not only lead the entire NFL in points scored this season, but they also have allowed the second fewest number of points in the NFL. It's not just the offense that's crushing it. Defense has been lights out so far this year. It's been really great. Shout out to all the Lions fans out there.
Complimentary football.
Exactly.
It's all three.
We've been waiting for this, Lions fans, to have Thanksgiving.
They're wagging.
People are excited to watch us play football.
They are a wagon.
Go Detroit. All right. Let's talk about the Giants and the Cowboys.
Remember when this would have been the number one game on the
slate? A couple years ago, this one would have been the game everyone was talking about.
We'll do numbers, too. You know, it always does, right?
Oh, right. I just wonder.
It's beyond.
These have the fan bases that the two fan bases will watch. They'll say they're not going to, but they're going to.
You know that Cowboys fans always show up to be able to watch this. I know a lot of Giants fans have kind of just ducked out on football this year.
There's certainly a lot of fantasy potential. I mean, there were fantasy names on these rosters.
Vanya, let me ask you this question then. You're talking about potential.
The over-under on Malik Nabers getting a football?
I mean, we're at least going to see a target in the first half, right? That's going to happen.
I believe that we will see a target. I'm willing. Do you want to put that on the board?
Yeah, that one I'm with you with. I'm with you on that one.
Half. And no, how can you not? I think that we're going to see, there's got to be, the question on our rundown is a bounce back week for Nabers. I don't know what a bounce back is at this point because he's been so invisible, but you have to hope that this is the focal point for the Giants offense. Do one thing. Get the ball to Malik Nabers.
We have been using this contract quite a bit recently in terms of is it a yes or is it a no in terms of starting Malik Nabers. My ranking would tell you that it's darn close. He's wide receiver 20 this week for me. Still going to lean towards yes playing Malik Nabers. The volume, even though he doesn't get a single target in the first half last week, still ends up with 9. If you told me sight unseen, 9 targets from Malik Nabers, I'm signing up for that. The rest of the Giants offense, though, a little bit dicey because we think about Tyrone Tracy, who's my running back 23 for the week. So still going to be started. There's only one thing you have to fear right now with Tyrone Tracy. It's one, and it's a pretty notable thing. Back-to-back games with fumbles.
Yeah.
Lost fumbles and critical lost fumbles, too. You just don't know. It seems like the leash is longer because he's clearly their most talented back, but coaches can be funny, too, right? So I think the only fear you have in playing Tyrone Tracy is that you start him, he fumbles again, it happens early, and he gets banished to the bench for the entirety of the remainder of the game. That being said, that feels like too unlikely of an occurrence for me to bank on, so I'm still going to play him with a decent amount of confidence because the Cowboys, as we know, have been amongst the worst defenses in the entire NFL.
It was a great match.
Fifth most fantasy points to opposing running backs allowed.
Yeah, I feel like this is a situation. Wasn't there another Giants great running back that had fumbling issues for a long time?
Tiki Barber.
Yeah, and so
High and tight. Remember, he used to carry the football around after. He's going
After
he
everything.
used to carry the football like the rest. I was like holding a baby or something.
like you're going around, and I feel like he had to do that in the locker room.
Well, when you gotta support the baby's head when they're nice and young, right? So I don't hold my baby like this. No, no, I don't do that.
Just two-fisted baby.
Yeah, I bicep curl my kids. Yeah.
I would still have him. Very similar to where you have him. I have his running back 24, and again, it's just because this matchup is so good. I feel like you can comfortably start him if you need him.
Yep.
When on the other side, there's only one guy from the Dallas Cowboys that I feel comfortable in starting, and that would be CeeDee Lamb. And even with all the issues that they've been having on offense, he's still getting enough volume here from Cooper Rush to feel like you can confidently start him.
His new name is actually CeeDee Landry, as in paying homage to Jarvis Landry.
Jarvis Landry.
Because over the past 4 games, this is CeeDee Lamb's stat line: 32 catches for 228 yards and 0 touchdowns. That's an average of 7.125 yards per catch. Now, that tracks, right? They can't really throw the football down the field. They can't protect. They can't really run the football. So they're basically just manufacturing touches for their best offensive player. Good enough for PPR purposes for him to still be my wide receiver 9 for the week. He has been kind of in that, he feels like a decent bet to end up somewhere between 15 and somewhere below 20 points each week.
Yeah. I mean, unfortunately, here's the thing. Fortunately, it still feels like it's a pretty high floor with everything, but the ceiling that he had that was 30-plus points feels like it's evaporated, unfortunately, in this offense.
10 catches for 67 yards last week.
That's not great.
I'm trying to remember back to when, as somebody who drafted him first in one of their leagues, that he had 46 fantasy points, and I don't remember that far back.
Oh.
This year it happened?
I thought it did.
Honestly, I can't remember what I had for breakfast this morning. So
I'd have to go back and look.
Well,
I have no idea.
Okay.
But I'll tell you what, CeeDee Lamb at least is a starter given all the volume that he's getting. If you pick this game really quickly, are you going to take the Cowboys or the Giants? I'm taking the Cowboys.
Taking turkey.
Yeah, I'm going to take the Cowboys with their Thanksgiving tradition and might see Luke Schoonmaker again. Jake Ferguson still dealing with a concussion.
I'll go with the Cowboys as well. How about them?
Good to know. This is a great game to have some dessert, close your eyes, wake up like midway through the third quarter, and then it's like, oh, cool, football's still on. Yeah. All right. When we come back, we're going to continue diving into the Thanksgiving Day games. We'll see you in just a moment. Download the ESPN Bet app Sportsbook to claim your new player bonus, and for a limited time, unlock access to 30 days of ESPN Plus to stream exclusive live sports. Sign up with the promo code FANTASY to get started today. Again, that is the ESPN Sportsbook app. Back here on Fantasy Focus, my name is Daniel Dopp, alongside Stephania Bell and Field Yates. We got one more Thanksgiving Day game as well as a Friday game to dive into. Let's talk about this. Packers and the Dolphins. This is going to be another good one. I think
it will be a good one, yeah.
It's going to be a good one.
The turkey
old.
sound.
Not used to it?
Get old.
Be a little jarring.
Are we at a spot where, Field, would you use the phrase Jalen Waddle is back?
I don't know if I would go that far.
Okay. Jalen Waddle is intriguing?
He is intriguing for sure.
Okay.
I've got him as wide receiver 28 this week. This is really I think we could lay out all the numbers that you want. I think this is really just your risk tolerance because it's a bad matchup. The Packers have allowed the 6th fewest fantasy points to opposing wide receivers. They've done a good job for much of this season. On top of that, Miami, as we know, has been a much better offense when things have been either played at home or played on the road in a warm climate. I have not checked the specific temperature for Green Bay on Thursday night, but I'm guessing it's not that warm. That being said, coming off of an 8-catch, 144-yard touchdown effort, are you going to bench Jalen Waddle? Wide receiver 28 for me.
Looks like 32 degrees with potential snow showers, Field Yates.
Like that, Daniel, or no?
I don't like that. No.
Like that.
I've got
Not at all.
Jalen Waddle as my wide receiver 35 this week, and the reason why is because I just feel like we have seen Jalen Waddle is supremely talented. Like, there's no doubting that. This is not about his talent level.
Yep.
But I feel like we have seen these situations where we have watched guys have one big week and then disappear back into the ether in an offense in which they just spread the ball around so much. The Dolphins are one of a number of teams that just have a bunch of different options that they throw the football to. So I think the way that you described it, Field, is absolutely perfect. It's like, what's your tolerance level for being able to start a guy that may go off or may not do anything? Like, that's sort of where it's at. Do you have that level of tolerance or not?
the feel-like temperature could be around 11 degrees during the day.
See, that makes me feel not good for any of these Dolphins players, to be honest. Would you trust? Well, I don't even know. So let me ask you this.
Tyreek Hill has moved off of the yes or no. It's no longer that.
What is it?
It's what are your options?
Right.
Like that's where we've gotten to with Tyreek Hill. Remember, this is where I was a couple weeks ago when we were talking about this, right? Like, but I, not to make this about my team, but like it's an example of where I think this is applicable. Is I have to choose 3 receivers, and the options are A.J. Brown is going to play.
Yep.
Tyreek Hill, Cortland Sutton,
Mashing.
Calvin Ridley.
Yeah.
Oof.
It's really Calvin Ridley and Tyreek Hill again, in my estimation. Like, those are the 2 guys you're trying to choose between.
Put it this way, whether you have a strong opinion or not, it's a debate, right?
The fact that it's a debate is the part that's fascinating to me. Objectively, as in somebody who doesn't have to make that decision, I don't know what I would do because he hasn't been targeted. So Tyreek Hill, I wanted to go back and just see how much he was targeted. We know that Tua didn't play for a stretch in there, but 12 targets week 1, 10 in week 5, and then it goes down to 9 once in week 8, 8 in week 11, 6 last week. I mean, Jalen Waddle was far out-targeted. And if that's where they're going to find success, if teams choose to try and cover Tyreek Hill and he hasn't been giving anybody reason to try to look his way, we haven't seen a lot of those breakaway plays or any of them really. Why would you have the confidence to put him in your lineup?
Confidence and trust are 2 words that I do not use with Tyreek Hill anymore.
Wide receiver 26 is where I'm at. Again, so we talked about this a little bit with the Lions, and we've sort of had this conversation, is that for the past 2 years with the Dolphins, when Tua's healthy, 2 guys, 17 and 10, 10 and 17, Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle. This year, 4 guys matter. Johnny Smith and Devon Achane. Right? So that's enough work taken away from those 2 guys that all of a sudden the idea of benching them has come into play. I'm sure there are many people who have a situation comparable to my 4 wide receivers for 3 spots roster dilemma. So Tyreek Hill, wide receiver 26 for me, which depending on your roster construction might be low enough where that is not going to be in your lineup.
Yeah, and this is a really good Packers secondary as well. They've been very good against opposing teams' wide receivers. Given what the weather is going to look like, I think this is one of those situations where I actually would rather have 6 teams on a bye and have the decision made for me.
I know, right?
Rather than feel like I've got to now make a decision because of it. On the other side, I do want to ask this. Are we just out altogether on Green Bay Packers wide receivers? Like, I'm as big of a Jaden Reed apologist as there is right here in ESPN Fantasy, but I don't know how I can have trust in Jaden Reed or Romeo Dobbs or Christian Watson or any of these
You have 1
guys.
fewer to contend with this week because Romeo Dobbs with a concussion, not likely to play. So now you're down to Christian Watson, Jaden
And
Reed,
Dontavian Weeks and Malik
Dontavian
Heath
Weeks,
and Bo
Oh,
Melton.
that's not fair. You can't include Malik Heath.
Don't say it's not fair when he's the one that got a touchdown last week, Stephania. I'm at a point now where Jaden Reed is not only not a must start, but I feel like with no teams on a bye, he is outside my my comfort.
I'm about to turn him into the best wide receiver in the week this week by saying this.
Yes, Field, please.
Let's talk about this. Over the last 2 games, he has 5 total targets.
Yep.
5.
Yep.
Jaden Reed has 28 or fewer receiving yards in 4 of his past 6 games. Dolphins have allowed the 2nd fewest fantasy points to opposing wide receivers. All the signs indicate this is a player who probably should be on your bench this week.
Yep.
That's where I land.
I'm with you. I am as wide receiver 46th, and that's the highest amongst all of the Green Bay wide receivers for me this week. So
They are a very good football team who is, right there in the thick of it in the NFC playoff picture, even has a chance for that division, an outside chance, but still a chance. Their hallmark right now, their identity is run the crap out of the ball.
Yeah.
honestly,
What do do? It's Josh Jacobs.
if it's a 32-degree game with potential snow that feels like 11 degrees, it feels
I
like
just
that.
wonder, it's really interesting because 4 days after putting up that kind of volume of work, I just wonder how much they can lean on Josh Jacobs. But don't forget their tight end, Tucker Kraft, because he seems to find the end zone, not consistently, but enough to make you intrigued.
Yeah.
And enough to take away from perhaps another wide receiver.
Tucker Kraft has the 2nd most, well, that was going into the game, but I think he has the 2nd most receiving touchdowns of all tight ends so far this year. So that's been a tough one.
Well, remember, we said tight ends don't need touchdowns to be
right.
valuable. So
You're
it's a little bit misleading.
Stephania, are you taking the Packers or Dolphins in this one?
In that weather, Packers.
Yeah, me too.
Packers as well.
Yeah.
It's a huge game, though. Miami 5-6, kind of right there knocking on the door. Denver's at 7-5 with the final playoff spot as of right now. And by the way, we're far enough into the season where you can actually do these like playoff scenarios in your brain.
Yeah. All right, I'm going to take the Packers as well.
I would love, it'd be fun, though, for the Dolphins to kind of rewrite the narrative on not being able to win in the cold weather,
That'd be great
on the
for the
road, and
Dolphins
all
to
of
win.
that, So
They need one of those wins. They need.
Why not mix it up a little bit, Dolphins? Let's see that.
All right, let's talk about our Friday game that we have, Raiders and the Chiefs.
Yeah.
Let's start with Kansas City. We said a bunch of mean stuff, and I'll specifically say I said a bunch of mean stuff about Patrick Mahomes earlier this year. And to be fair, earlier this season, it was justified. Like, he was not startable earlier this season. But Field, he has turned a page and become a different quarterback, the guy that it feels like we sort of used to know.
Yeah, quarterback 7 for me this week. He is trending up for sure. He has exactly 3 passing touchdowns in 3 of his last 4 games. He's had 2 big games during that 4-game stretch. So Patrick Mahomes certainly playing better. The defense has kind of let them down over the past couple of weeks, so they have needed the offense to pick up some of the slack. As we know with Patrick Mahomes, he is a mobile quarterback. He had 60 rushing yards last week, which is by far his highest total in a game this season. Not expecting Patrick Mahomes to have 60 every single week, but you just get a little bit of extra sauce there from Patrick Mahomes' legs. So he's quarterback 7 for me. This matchup, not one that I am particularly scared of for this Chiefs offense. I think the biggest question mark in this entire game, and I'm kind of hoping, and I don't know about expecting, but thinking the decision will be made for us, is Kareem Hunt and Isaiah Pacheco.
Yeah, I exactly took the words right out of my mouth, because Isaiah Pacheco, everybody anxious for his return, but you feel like with the Chiefs, do they really need this against the Raiders? Would they benefit from keeping him out just one more week, letting Kareem Hunt take the ball? He does not have to be activated until next Tuesday, I believe, is the final day. So they don't have to activate him and carry him on the roster for this Friday game. It might just behoove them to wait a little bit longer. I still believe that when Pacheco comes back, all it's going to do, to your point, is cloud the issue, because I don't think he's going to get a ton of volume out of the gate. It's just a tough injury with a fractured fibula and some soft tissue damage around the ankle to come back and be exactly who you were before. You look at other running backs like Tony Pollard, there's an adaptation to coming back from this injury. So you don't want to be in a position where you're like, oh, Pacheco's back. How do I not start him? But I'm just nervous about that first game that he returned.
Let me ask you this question, Stephania, just being the injury analyst here on our show. If you had Kareem Hunt in a league, would you be pretty confident going into this week that you would have him be able to start, or are you going to try to make plans just in case?
Oh, I would be pretty confident, because I think either way, he does more of the work.
Okay.
I would agree. I think the first game that Isaiah Pacheco is back, whether it's this Friday or next Sunday, I still will feel good about Kareem Hunt's chances.
Yeah.
Now, the second or third game, I might not.
Yeah, that may
change.
First game we'll have that conversation then.
Regardless of when that first game back is, I feel like they're still going to have a lot of Kareem Hunt in their lives.
Yeah. I got to be honest, too. When I look at this, in spite of the fact that Patrick Mahomes has been so good, I'm not sure outside of Travis Kelce there's a pass catcher that I feel confidence in starting. There are a bunch of good dart throws here because Patrick Mahomes is Patrick freaking Mahomes. But I don't feel confident in DeAndre Hopkins. I don't feel confident in Xavier Worthy. I don't feel confident in Noah Gray. Juju Smith-Schuster, is he potentially going to be back?
He was back last week. Looked better.
Yep. See, and there we go. All right. So, I don't feel confident in any.
I agree on that. I don't think any of the Chiefs wide receivers is a must start this week by any stretch. We have seen, again, this team has done a really good job of getting a ton of people involved, which is part of the reason why Patrick Mahomes has
they're
played
good
much
at football.
Better. On the Raiders side, guys, we know there's sort of 2 players that matter the most right now, right? It's
Brock Bowers
and Jacoby Myers, who has just been sopping up the targets. This Raiders offense, not sure they'll move the football particularly well, but enough volume for those 2 guys to very much keep.
I'm going to go out on a limb and take the Chiefs. How about you guys?
Chiefs.
All right.
Chiefs.
You hesitated for a minute there, Stephania.
It just pains her to say so.
Thank you.
Yeah, there we go.
For understanding my dilemma.
All right, when we come back, we got more here on Fantasy Focus. Stick around. We'll see you in just a moment. You know the best part of ESPN Fantasy? It's you guys, the fantasy football community. And we want to make sure we're always answering your questions. Head on over to Twitter and use the hashtag FFNow to drop in a few questions to see what you can do for your lineups on Week 13. Use the hashtag FFNow and tune in this Sunday on ESPN2 at 10 a.m. Eastern to see if your question makes it on the show. Back here on Fantasy Focus, we're going to dive into our show league because we also play fantasy football, my friend. Stephania, I thought you were crushing us in this league. Am I wrong about that, or was that the FF Now league?
I know, because I'm dominating,
You're dominating
in
so many leagues, I can't keep them all
here's
straight.
the problem is I got off to a hot start in a lot of leagues, and I'm getting my comeuppance now because all these other teams are sneaking up on me, and our producer, Tyler, had the nerve to put in last night's rundown that I had won our matchup.
Wow.
And I did not realize that matchup was not yet complete. So imagine my surprise when I woke up this morning to a defeat. Did not like that.
Yeah.
Sneaky
That's tough.
Tyler.
Sneaky Tyler. I mean,
Yeah.
you look at the standings here.
This
and
is
things
crazy,
have gotten
by the way.
close, Field
This is
Yates.
fun.
All right, so we got Trophy Smack out in first place. Our producer Tyler is in second place along with Jack Sandagello. And then you've got a boatload of a log jam.
All right, so there's 12 teams in this league. 6 of them are going to make the playoffs.
Right.
The 4th through the 10th, 4 through 9.
4 through 9.
13 and 11, that's Stephania all the way. She's the highest scoring 13 and 11 team.
Yes.
I am the lowest scoring 12 and 12 team. So I'm in 9th place. And by the end of this week, there's a scenario where I could be in 4th place.
That's unreal.
It's wild. So it's it's unlikely, but it's also crazy that and I guess the same goes for Stephania then, right?
Yes.
You're in 4th place, but could move down to 9th by the end of the week. The numbers still favor those things not happening, but we are getting to a very competitive last 2 weeks.
This is the problem if you have a lot of players on one team that you thought all those players were really good, and then the team ends up not being so good, and that's my 49ers. So I have not had the greatest production from guys like, I don't know, Deebo Samuel. Christian McCaffrey had maybe his worst week of football in a long time.
Yep.
So anything can happen. It's a reminder that anything can happen in fantasy. And also, I think for everybody listening out there, this is why I like having bigger playoff rosters. It makes it more fun at the end because everybody feels like they have something to play for.
Bigger playoff fields, that you mean?
Bigger, yes.
Yeah, I agree. I'm with you. I like.
Yeah, not roster.
People still have some skin in the game now, right? I mean,
This was a tough one because, Stephania, Derrick Henry had himself a really good game, right? What was it, 140 yards?
140 yards.
But you lost by 5 fantasy points, which means him not scoring for the first time all season as well.
By the way, he had one called back last night.
Yeah.
Brutal.
Yeah.
Brutal.
Penalty.
That's a self-inflicted wound there.
Yeah.
It was one of those, it was an illegal
Tight
formation.
end was lined up, yeah.
He didn't cover up the tackle, which is not like a hold or it's not like, too many men or something like that. It was just the guy lined up 3 inches further back than he needed to, and that's the kind of thing that can cost you your fantasy matchup.
Any words for Charlie Kolar, Stephania? No? All
I
right.
had some last night, but
Well, but not now.
an
We moved on.
SFW.
Good vibes today. Good vibes Tuesday. That's where we're at.
Or
I got an
Let's talk
ugly
about your
win.
game.
I got an ugly win over Liz.
they don't have to be pretty.
They don't have to be pretty.
No
No,
style points.
that's right.
Just point points.
Liz, her team, didn't exactly bring it this weekend, is what I would say. But yeah, so Justin Herbert was my quarterback, so I had Brian Robinson Jr. get hurt. That wasn't ideal.
Yep.
Justin Jefferson must have gotten hurt too, right? There's no way he only had
4.7. Well, Juwan Jennings must have gone off. He's been unbelievable.
He's been great, yeah. So tough week at the office for me. But I thought last night maybe I could get, and it didn't matter because it was going to be a win one way or the other, but I was hoping just for,
Points.
yeah, hope points and just talking about it on the show today that maybe Herbert would drop 25 and Zay Flowers would have 20, and next thing you know, it was a 130 to whatever her number is, 76 smashing. No, not really.
Brother TJ really came through for you here. TJ
did.
Hawkins has scored the most
I
points.
do feel,
in your
but
entire
I do
season.
feel good about the team now because going forward with T. Higgins back this upcoming week, the roster that I sort of envisioned when I made the Justin Jefferson CMC trade will be full for this weekend. So
we cannot evaluate that trade. In yesterday's show, we talked about it being the best worst trade ever.
Yeah, or the
because
worst
neither of
best.
us really
We haven't
came out.
decided yet.
Yeah, worst best.
I don't know the
It
answer.
doesn't even matter.
I think you
But
should say worst best because that's how it really turned out.
I don't think we can really fully evaluate it until this week.
Yeah.
If we both have
Agreed.
dogs this week, then
Yeah, then it's a problem.
If
yeah.
your guys' trade ruined Justin Jefferson and CMC for the rest of the fantasy community, I'm going to be so pissed at you guys for the rest of the season.
I will bear that blame. We deserve it. Yeah.
So
it's
frustrated.
Fields' fault. He initiated it.
Well, I sort of felt like, with those two guys, one of the things about those trades, when you make a trade of 2 players of that caliber, is that you probably have enough investment in those 2 guys that it's if I trade away Justin Jefferson and CMC all of a sudden goes off, at least my CMC teams benefit, right? And like conversely for Stephania, like if she acquires CMC and then Jefferson becomes once again the best receiver in fantasy for the rest of the way, you probably have Jefferson elsewhere where it's like, well, at least I got better in that other league. So that's kind of like the mentality that I adopted there, which is a totally ridiculous way to go about your fantasy insight. But I'm just a human.
That wasn't my mentality. My mentality was when Justin Jefferson did poorly, I was like, come on, McCaffrey.
Come on, CMC.
Come on, let's crush this and make it look like the best trade ever.
Fair enough.
That's just my competitiveness, but it serves me right. Look what happened.
Yeah. I feel bad. I crushed our buddy Eric Moody this week. To be fair, my team
I don't think you feel bad.
166. You're the best scorer of the week.
My team put up a lot of points, but I do want to say this while we're looking at this. Like Lamar Jackson was great. David Montgomery did really well. Amon-Ra, only 12.2 fantasy points. But when you've got Nico Collins and Jordan Addison and Trey McBride, even Rico Dowdle scored double-digit fantasy points for me.
Oh my gosh!
I mean,
You had
everybody-
all home runs.
That's a good team, right? That's a good-looking team.
It did not help Eric Moody that Joe Burrow, Breece Hall, James Cook, Devontae Adams, and Kyle Pitts, his entire bench was on a bye. There was not a single player that he started that like he didn't have the choice. He had to play all the guys that he played because an entire bench had a bye week this week. So it was just
You know
a brutal
what?
one
You
for
could have told me about that bench, and there's some on there that I would have thought, they really didn't perform.
Really?
Because
Yeah,
I would have
you could have
believed
no
that
idea.
based on how things are going.
Yeah, we're in a spot. I got to take on this next week, Stephania, our producer Tyler, which this is going to be a huge
Good
one
luck.
for
Have fun
playoff
with that.
matchups.
He'll probably tell you won.
He's going to put it in the show notes. Yeah, that's exactly what's going to happen.
Well, it's going to be a fascinating finish here just because there are so many teams that play each other where you get one good week, and I'm telling you, like, this whole standings thing could be turned upside down. So a very fun finish ahead here in our Fantasy Focus Show League, which, by the way, like, what's going to happen is we're going to have some wild scenarios where, like, playoff spots 4 through 6 get jumbled in the last 2 weeks of the season, and then Trophy Smack just crushes all of us by
Everybody.
like
I know.
50 in every week at the playoffs.
I play Liz this week. Maybe she'll be tired from F1, won't pay much attention
it.
to her roster.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Tough week for
I also can't believe that, like, Mike Clay, this was the league that he complained about because he auto-drafted.
Yeah,
Speaking of
we've
my
all heard it.
daughters.
Yeah.
And now he's 13-11. I feel like he's somewhere he's juicing the numbers.
You know what he did is he had an excuse built in, but then when his team started turning it around, it was because he managed it so well, despite the auto draft.
Field had an excuse built in as well, and then tried his best to like reverse engineer a way to be able to get his team to play. Because this was like your worst team, I think, that
I've
you've
ever drafted. Like, I just drafted every hurt player.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I had the first pick. I took Christian McCaffrey. I ended up drafting T. Higgins, who got hurt, right? I had Michael Pittman Jr. and the downfall of that offense early in the season. Jordan Love got hurt after week 1. So it was like a comedy of Brian Robinson Jr. got hurt. It was like I really did pick
You're fighting an uphill battle here, Mike.
Yeah.
Yeah, but you know what? Haven't lost faith. Have had some great, very honest conversations in the locker room. I feel like our communication peer-to-peer has been better than maybe any team I've ever been a part of. So while we need some good things to go in our favor the rest of the way, like, do not count us out.
Have you taken some of that Jim Harbaugh, aura and brought it to your own locker room for fantasy purposes? Because he has faith in his team.
He does have faith in
I know Field's been doing a lot of Jim Harbaugh impressions. I'm just wondering if you just carried that right over to your fantasy.
Did you guys see the quote last night from Jim?
Which one?
Jim, so great. Like, before the game, they interviewed, obviously, both of the coaches. And it was like, John, like, what are your thoughts on playing Jim? And it was like, I love Jim. He's a great guy. I think he's a great coach. Can't wait to compete. And then Jim, they're like,
I know
what
what
do you think
you're
about
gonna
playing
say.
against John? He's like, I'd lay my life on the line for my brother John, but I can't let him beat me today. Just like,
Yeah, that's the competitive nature that exists between brothers.
they're
I
one of a
feel
kind.
like.
They're one of a, I guess, two of a kind. Yeah.
Yeah. It was very fun to listen to Peyton and Eli talk about them going up against each other as brothers as well when you were watching the Manning cast last night. It's always just fun being able to have brothers.
Yeah, and then Jason talking about him and Travis coming up in football together. It really is cool to see these sibling relationships that are so tight that have just, they talk about how the bond is so much more important than the game. But then when the games are actually played, you find out that that bond is truly tested.
Yeah, you've definitely tested that bond for sure, 100%. All right, when we come back, we're going to close things out here on Fantasy Focus. We'll see you guys in just one moment. Download the ESPN Bet Sportsbook to claim your new player bonus, and for a limited time, unlock access to 30 days of ESPN Plus to stream exclusive live sports. Sign up with the promo code FANTASY to get started today. That is the ESPN Bet Sportsbook app. Back here on Fantasy Focus, Field Yates, Stephania Bell, and my name is Daniel Dopp. That's going to close it out for our Tuesday show tomorrow. We're going to dive into everything that is the rest of Week 13. Stephania, you are not going to be with us because you're going to go visit Mama Bell for Thanksgiving. Is that accurate?
Yeah, my brother is hosting us in L.A. I will be on the left coast by tonight.
Nice, enjoy.
Yeah, so
That'll
I'll
be
be right
very
near the ocean. Don't miss me too much.
I'm
sure you won't.
Please give Mama
Don't
Bell
miss us too much, which I'm sure you won't. Yeah.
Yeah.
We got to drag Mike back into the studio tomorrow.
You know, it's about time he shows back up to work, honestly, is the way that
I
one's
know.
gonna
Does
play
he
out.
still
First
work
Wednesday
on a
show in
regular
forever.
basis? Yeah.
No, he skips.
Or he's
Plays
late.
hooky. Yeah.
Or he's late.
I'll be.
Yeah.
Don't worry. I'll be checking the injury reports. I'll be posting things about it.
And I know, like I said, this is going to be a short week for us here on Fantasy Focus, but you can follow everybody on social media. I'm sure there's going to be a ton of updates throughout the week, as well as Fantasy Football Now.
Yeah.
On Sunday morning, it's going to be a very big show with everything that we have lined up there, so make sure you come back and hang out with us there. Guys, I hope you have a really awesome Thanksgiving. It's going to be really great. Stephania, specifically for you.
I'll see you tomorrow.
We'll
yeah.
talk about it more
I know.
tomorrow, Field Yates.
I
with
know.
Stephania. I hope
Thanks
you have an
for
awesome
holding down
time
the
with your
fort.
family. Is
Thank
your
you.
brother in a fantasy league with you? Like, speaking of this sibling rivalry.
No, not anymore. We used to be in one together. But both my brother and his wife, there are huge fantasy football players. She has a really competitive league at her law firm.
Wow.
And every year they kind of ask her, they give her the business about
Of course
having
they
a
do.
ringer. in the
Insider
family.
trading.
I gotta tell you, she manages it on her own. I might help her a little bit around draft time, but she manages it on her own, and she does quite well.
Do you think she's better than your brother?
I don't think he wants to find out.
Okay.
Ooh,
That's fair.
fighting words right there. You
Yeah,
love it.
That's very fair on that one. All right. Well, when we come back tomorrow, it's going to be very fun. Me, Field, and Mike diving into the rest of the Week 13 matchups.
Yeah.
Stephania, have an awesome time over there on the West Coast.
Thank you.
I'm going to miss you very much. And for you guys, today's show is presented by Wingstop, our buddies over at Wingstop. Thank you very
hungry.
much for that. Don't forget to love each other, be kind to yourself, and we'll see you guys tomorrow.